The night I learned my marriage was already over, the rain on our Seattle windows sounded exactly like someone whispering a warning I had ignored for too long. I remember staring at the glass, watching droplets race each other down the pane while the city lights blurred behind them soft, gold, streaks melting into the darkness. It was a quiet evening, the kind that usually made me feel safe. But that night, something inside me felt hollow, as if my ribs had become an empty house echoing with footsteps that didn't belong to me anymore. I didn't know the full truth yet. I only knew that my husband, Carter, had started coming home later, smelling faintly of a perfume I couldn't place. Something floral, something too young for me. But that night, as I sat at the edge of our gray velvet sofa, I felt it. A shift. A crack in the story I'd been telling myself about my life. And I couldn't unfeel it. My name is Natalie Brooks. I'm 34 years old, the chief financial officer of a mid-sized tech firm in Seattle, and until a few months ago, I thought I had built a steady life. Structured, predictable, safe. Numbers made sense to me. Budgets behaved. Even crises had patterns I could follow. People, not as much. Especially the people we trust most. Before everything shattered, my life moved like clockwork. I'd wake before dawn, long before Carter stirred, and make myself a cup of coffee, dark roast, splash of oat milk. A habit I picked up during graduate school. I liked the quiet of the morning, the way the world felt suspended. I'd sit by the kitchen island, listening to the soft hum of the refrigerator, reviewing the day's reports, while the sky over Pike Place Market slowly shifted from indigo to gray. Carter would join me an hour later, hair messy, eyes still soft with sleep. He'd kiss the side of my head and murmur, "Morning, Nat," in that easy voice of his. He always smelled faintly of cedar soap. For 8 years, that scent made me feel like home had a heartbeat. We didn't have children. Not because we didn't want them, at least. That's what I believed. But because we kept saying next year, until the years piled up like untouched planners on a shelf. Carter said we were too busy, that the timing wasn't right, that we needed to stabilize our lives. Our lives had felt stable enough to me. When I left for work, he'd still be in the shower, singing off-key, and I'd smile to myself, believing that this quiet, imperfect life was ours. At the office, my world felt crisp and orderly. Spreadsheets, projections, investment meetings. I liked the clean lines of my role, the way everything had a place. My assistant, Priya, teased that I breathed in balance sheets like oxygen. Maybe she was right. At home, though, Carter was the dreamer. The spontaneous one. The one who suggested we try new restaurants or take last-minute trips to Bainbridge Island. I used to think that made us complementary two halves of a well-balanced equation. Looking back, maybe we were just two people living in parallel lines, close but never touching at the same angle. Still, I believed we were happy. Or at least, steady. It wasn't until the small, quiet shifts began, the kind you don't notice until you do, that I realized something was changing. And then I met Ethan Reed. But that part comes later. Because before betrayal come suspicion. Before suspicion comes, the unease that sits in the corner of your mind and watches you. The first strange thing happened on a Wednesday. A perfectly ordinary, drizzly Seattle day. Carter and I were supposed to meet for lunch at a little cafe near his office. He canceled 20 minutes before. Texting, "Running late. Don't wait up. Rain check?" It didn't bother me at first. His job at the architecture firm could get hectic. But something about the message felt rushed. The punctuation wasn't his, and the tone was almost apologetic in a way he didn't usually sound. I brushed it off, but brushing off became a habit I didn't realize I was forming. That night, he came home smelling like that unfamiliar perfume again. Light. Sweet. A hint of something like jasmine mixed with citrus. I remember leaning in to hug him and feeling my stomach tighten. Just slightly. "New client?" I asked casually. "Yeah," he said too quickly. They're developing a boutique hotel concept. Lots of design work. Long hours. He corrected himself. But it was too late. Still, I didn't ask more. Because asking felt like stepping onto ice I wasn't sure could hold my weight. Instead, I made dinner, rosemary chicken and roasted potatoes, and listened to him talk about building materials while my mind drifted to that perfume. Little by little, more things began to shift. He started keeping his phone face down. He stopped telling me about his day. He worked late more often, sometimes coming home with his hair damp as if he'd showered somewhere else. He seemed distant, not cruel, just far away, like he was walking backward while smiling at me. I kept telling myself it was stress, work, burnout, life. People go through phases, right? But something in his eyes, tired, evasive, unfocused, kept scraping against the inside of my chest. The moment that truly unsettled me came one Saturday afternoon. Carter said he needed to go into the office, just for a bit. 2 hours later, I realized he'd left his tablet on the dining table. Carter never forgot his tablet. ever. It was practically glued to him. I stared at it for a long time, feeling like it was watching me back. My fingers hovered over the screen, but I didn't open it. I told myself I trusted him, but trust shouldn't feel like swallowing glass. That night, he came home with a new excuse. Something about a design review running longer than expected. I nodded. He smiled. We pretended we were fine, but something inside me whispered, just like the rain that night. This is the beginning. I woke up that night to silence. Carter's side of the bed was cold. The sheets pulled taut as if untouched. I stared at the ceiling, listening to the ticking of the old clock on the wall and the faint hum of rain against the window. Something felt wrong, but I couldn't name it yet. My mind spun quietly with questions I wasn't ready to ask. The next morning, I noticed his phone buzzed twice in rapid succession, messages from a contact saved only as SR. I tried not to let my curiosity get the better of me. The messages were brief, but I could see snippets, words like tonight, can't wait, the cabin. My heart clenched, but I forced myself to breathe through the tightness. I didn't confront him right then. Instead, I started paying attention more closely. The small details began to pile up like autumn leaves, easy to miss when you're distracted, but unmistakable once you start seeing them all together. He began guarding his phone more fiercely, tucking it into his jacket pockets instead of leaving it on the kitchen counter. His laughter felt forced sometimes, as if he was practicing to hide something. The way he answered questions about work shifted. Too brief, evasive, distracted. And then there was Sophia Reed. I didn't know her at first. Just a name I overheard once or twice when Carter took calls from the office. Sophia. A project partner, he said. A creative mind on the hotel design. But the name started to repeat itself, whispered in the background of conversations and overheard phone calls. I saw it pop up in his emails, his calendar. Then came the weekend trips labeled business retreat that never made sense. I wasn't naive. I'd read enough novels and seen enough movies to know where this might be headed. But I held on to hope, the hope that I was imagining things. Until one evening, I saw them. It was a Monday. The sky was a flat gray, and the air smelled of wet pavement and pine. I had left the office late, running a report on a new acquisition deal that was consuming my thoughts. The parking lot was nearly empty when I pulled in near Carter's building downtown. I didn't mean to look. I swear I didn't. But as I walked toward the entrance, I caught a glimpse through the glass doors. A woman's laugh spilling out, warm and bright. I saw Carter's face, too relaxed, alive, leaning in close to her like he'd forgotten how to be with me. Her hair was chestnut brown, tumbling in soft waves, and she wore a leather jacket over a flowy dress. She looked different than I'd imagined, less the business partner, and more a secret kept under lock and key. I froze, the blood draining from my face. My hands clenched the straps of my bag until my knuckles turned white. They didn't notice me. I wanted to run. I wanted to scream. But instead, I just stood there, watching the life I thought I knew slip through my fingers like smoke. That night, my mind spun wildly. I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying the scene, her laughter, the way Carter's eyes lit up. I felt something break inside me, something I hadn't expected. Not anger, exactly, but a deep, aching betrayal that settled heavy on my chest. The next day, I decided to do what I'd told myself I wouldn't. I called Sophia's husband, Ethan. I found his number after a few minutes of searching online. It was strange, reaching out to the man whose wife was sharing the secret life with my husband. My voice felt fragile and strange as I introduced myself, as if I were apologizing for intruding on his life. To my surprise, Ethan was calm, quiet, even. He didn't yell or accuse. He listened. He told me he'd suspected something for months but didn't want to believe it. We talked for a long time, more than I expected. There was no bitterness between us, just shared grief and a quiet determination. We decided to meet. The plan was simple. We would confront them not with rage, but with clarity. Ethan and I agreed to arrive early at the cabin. Carter and Sophia had been renting secretly a small, isolated place in the Cascade Mountains, where they'd planned to escape for the weekend. The morning we drove up, the sky was an overcast canvas of pale blue and gray. The air smelled like damp earth and pine needles. My hands trembled slightly on the steering wheel, but I kept my voice steady as Ethan sat beside me, calm and collected. We talked about the past, the moments we missed, the signs we ignored. There was a strange comfort in sharing the weight of betrayal with someone who understood it from both sides. When we pulled up to the cabin, it sat quietly among the towering firs, a modest wooden structure with smoke curling softly from the chimney. I felt my heart pound as we walked to the door. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of cedar and something floral, Sophia's perfume. The curtains were drawn, but light spilled through the cracks in the wood-paneled walls, casting long shadows. Carter and Sophia were there, caught between surprise and fear when Ethan and I appeared. Sophia's face was pale, her eyes wide but tired. Carter's usual calm was gone, replaced by something I hadn't seen before: unease. I saw Ethan's jaw tighten, but no one spoke at first. Then Sophia's voice broke the silence, quiet but resolute. "I'm pregnant," she said. "It's Ethan's." The words hung heavy in the room. Carter's face went white, and I felt something shift deep inside me, a resolve I hadn't expected. I reached into my bag and pulled out a folder of the divorce papers I'd prepared weeks ago. "This ends today," I said, my voice steady. The room was thick with silence after I dropped the folder onto the rough wooden table. Carter's eyes flickered toward it, then back to me, searching for the woman he thought he knew but clearly didn't. Sophia looked away, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Ethan stood beside me, his presence quiet but steady, like the ground beneath a trembling tree. I took a deep breath. "This is the divorce. I've already talked to my lawyer. I'm not here to yell or scream. I'm here because I need the truth, and I need to reclaim my life." Carter swallowed hard. "Natalie, I didn't want you to find out like this." "But I did," I said softly, feeling the weight of years crashing down on me. "And now, we have to decide what happens next." Sophia's voice trembled. "I didn't mean for any of this to happen. Ethan, I'm sorry." Ethan shook his head slowly. "Sorry doesn't fix this, Sophia, but we'll figure out how to move forward. Together." For a moment, I saw them as two people caught in a storm, not entirely of their own, making flawed, human, broken. Then Carter looked at me, desperation breaking through his mask. "Natalie, please, we can fix this. I love you." His words were hollow echoes in a room that had already moved on. I shook my head, the last thread of my old life snapping. "No, love doesn't look like this. Not when it's built on lies." I stood up, heart pounding, and walked to the door. Behind me, Carter's voice faltered into silence. Ethan stayed beside me as we left the cabin, the air outside sharp and cold against my skin. The weeks after the confrontation were a blur. I filed for divorce formally, and Carter moved out quietly. There were no public scenes, no messy confrontations, just a steady unraveling of the life we'd built, piece by painful piece. At work, I buried myself in spreadsheets and meetings. My colleagues noticed I was quieter, more reserved, but I kept my distance. This was my battle to fight alone. Ethan and I stayed in touch, not as lovers or enemies, but as two people who understood betrayal in a way few others could. There was something oddly comforting in knowing I wasn't alone in this. Our conversations were careful, measured. We shared updates on the divorce, on the healing, on the tangled mess of emotions we both navigated. One evening, as I sat on my balcony overlooking the Seattle skyline, Ethan called. He told me Sophia had given birth to a healthy baby girl. His voice was calm but touched with a softness I hadn't expected. "I'm scared, Natalie," he admitted, "but also hopeful. Maybe this is a chance for something new." I nodded even though he couldn't see me. "Me too," I said. "We'll get through this, one day at a time." Months passed. The sting of betrayal softened into something else: strength, resilience, a quiet knowing that life moves forward even when it feels impossible. I found a new rhythm. I started painting again, something I'd abandoned years ago. I took long walks in Discovery Park, letting the salty breeze clear the heaviness from my chest. And most importantly, I learned to trust myself again. Ethan and I remained friends, platonic, supportive. Neither of us rushed into anything new. We simply held space for healing. Sometimes, I wonder if Carter ever understood what he lost. But that thought no longer has the power to break me. I am no longer the woman who watched rain slide down a window and felt her world slip away. I am Natalie Brooks, stronger, wiser, and ready to write the next chapter. The truth about Carter's affair didn't stay a secret for long. Seattle's close-knit circles tend to whisper fast, especially when a high-profile couple like us is involved. Carter's colleagues knew. My friends knew. Even strangers seemed to notice the subtle shift in how I carried myself, less guarded, more resolute. The expected judgment. Maybe pity. Maybe even anger directed at me. But what I got was something else entirely. Respect. At work, my leadership felt steadier than ever. When questions about my personal life surfaced, I answered with quiet honesty, never revealing too much, but never hiding either. People admired the way I handled the situation with grace, strength, and dignity. Carter, on the other hand, faced his own consequences. His reputation at the firm took a hit. Rumors spread that his focus had wavered, that his personal life had bled into his work. A client pulled out of a project he was leading. The promotion he'd been eyeing slipped through his fingers. I didn't feel joy at his downfall, just a calm sense of justice. Sophia's pregnancy had complicated everything, and Ethan's decision to stand by her surprised many. They chose to work through their fractured marriage, not out of weakness, but from a place of understanding and commitment to their child. It was a messy, human thing, painful and imperfect. And I respected that. One afternoon, months after the confrontation, I attended a small gathering of friends at a cozy cafe near my apartment. The rain was gentle, tapping on the windows like a soft lullaby. Ethan was there too, sitting across from me with a quiet smile. We talked about everything and nothing. The baby, our jobs, the unexpected paths life takes when you least expect it. There was no bitterness between us, no blame. Only a shared understanding that some relationships don't end in tragedy, but in transformation. After the gathering, as I walked home through the damp streets, I breathed deeply, the scent of wet leaves and fresh coffee mingling in the air. I thought about how fragile trust is, how easily it can shatter. But I also thought about how resilient we are when we rebuild. Healing wasn't linear. Some days, the pain caught me off guard like a sudden thunderstorm on a clear day. But I learned to sit with those moments, to let them pass without losing myself. I found new ways to love myself. I surrounded myself with people who valued honesty and kindness. And I refused to let betrayal define me. One morning, as I stood in my kitchen sipping black coffee, I found myself smiling. Not because everything was perfect, but because I was finally free. Free from lies, free from fear, free to be the woman I was always meant to be. If there's one lesson I want to share, it's this. Betrayal cuts deep, but it doesn't have to break you. Sometimes, it's the painful ending that opens the door to a new beginning. Sometimes, when I'm alone in the quiet of my apartment, I think about how different life could have been. How easily I could have stayed trapped in a story that no longer served me. How the betrayal could have swallowed me whole. But it didn't. Instead, I chose to stand up. To face the truth, even when it hurt. To reclaim my story not as a victim, but as the author of my own life. I wonder about Carter sometimes. About what he learned, or if he learned anything at all. And about Sophia and Ethan, navigating their complicated path with a child in tow. We all have our own journeys, don't we? Some marked by heartbreak, some by healing, but all leading somewhere new. I don't pretend to have all the answers. I don't believe in perfect endings. Life is messy, unpredictable, and often unfair. But if there's one thing I've come to understand, it's this. Our worth isn't defined by others' choices. It's shaped by how we rise after falling, and how we carry the lessons forward with grace. If you're listening to this, maybe you're standing at your own crossroads, facing a betrayal, a loss, or a truth too painful to bear. I want you to know you are not alone. There is strength in facing the darkness, and even more strength in choosing to step into the light. So I ask you, if you were in my shoes, what would you do? Would you confront the truth as I did? Or walk away quietly? Tell me in the comments below. I'd love to hear your stories. And if this story spoke to you, please consider subscribing and sharing. Because sometimes, the bravest thing we can do is to speak our truth and listen to others in return. Thank you for letting me share my story. From my heart to yours, Natalie.